Hello everyone. So this may come as a bit of a shock to you, but I was not always a programmer. That's right. I was assigned not a programmer at birth, and I transitioned into one. Today we're going to talk about my first job. I know that sounds really boring, but hear me out. Movies are a very important part of our culture. Just think about how many people talk about Marvel movies, Harry Potter, Star Wars, all kinds of stuff. My first job that I got when I was 16 and had for 8 years was working at a movie theater. So what I'd like to do is actually explain some of the lesser known facts about how movie theaters are run, and if there's any I didn't cover, you can certainly add a comment down below, ask me anything you want about it. I worked there 8 years. I know a thing or two about how movie theaters work. So one of the most common misconceptions about movie theaters is that we choose what movies we get, and that's generally not the case, especially in a corporate setting. Normally that's handled by a booker and you get no say whatsoever in what movies come to your theater. This was always a fun topic to explain to customers who would be like, but we asked you for this movie, why don't you want this movie? And it's like, we do want this movie. We know you want this movie. We have no power. Another thing is that we don't actually set the schedule terribly particularly. Like they give us within like a half hour of when the show has to be, but that's really just for balancing all the other movies and making sure they all get out at roughly the same time and stuff like that, and balancing crowds and everything. The actual amount of flexibility that we have in the schedule making is very limited. So I was fortunate enough to work at a movie theater during the time where they transitioned from film to digital. So I actually know how to thread a movie through a very complicated professional projector, and that is a completely useless skill that I will carry with me to the grave. Sometimes movies get delivered on hard drives, but normally what is done now is that they're actually beamed into the theater by satellite, which is kind of crazy. But I mean, when you think about it, a movie is just data. The interesting thing is that most movies come to us encrypted. So we can't just hit play as soon as the movie's downloaded into the system. No, we have to actually get what are called keys. It's public key encryption. So the studio will send us keys that are active between certain times, and this is why we don't have terribly much control over the scheduling of the movies. And that's the only times those keys are valid and you can actually use them to play the movie. It's legitimately fascinating, and I may or may not have dug into the mechanism of how this actually works internally, and it's not getting cracked anytime soon. Sorry. The other interesting thing that's a common misconception is that the projectors will often say 4K on the screen, and most projectors are not actually equipped to handle 4K resolutions, and more importantly, most movies are not done in 4K on the actual projector themselves. The files usually come in 2K files, which are somewhere between 1080 and 4K obviously, but yeah, most movies are not actually full quality on those projectors. Especially in the early days of the digital film stuff, because they weren't really off of film quite yet and they didn't quite get the standards done. So in the hard drive days, which were short, it was a couple of years, they would ship you in a case with foam and everything, an actual hard drive that you plug in to actually what's called ingest the movie into the projector. Eventually my theater also got a server in-house that would store all the media, and then you could send it over the network to each of the projectors. So of course the space on the projector is finite. You can't usually fit all of the movies that you have in your server in all of the projectors at any given time. So you can't just flip a movie into another theater. And the transfer speeds, of course, are not gigabit, and even if they were, it wouldn't be enough. Because of the data transfer rates and everything that it would take to actually run the movie. You can't just stream the movie off of the server in there, and you have to ingest it into the projector. In other words, get it on their local RAID so that it can actually get enough speed to play the movie. These files are usually uncompressed, which is crazy. You wouldn't even get this on a home Blu-ray type thing. Everything is compressed by the time it gets to your house, but in the theater it's rendering every single frame uncompressed, which is kind of crazy. Back in the days of film, interestingly, the audio for a movie would occasionally come on an actual CD or a set of CDs, and it would sync up with time codes that were embedded in the actual, not negatives, the film itself would have time codes embedded in a barcode on the edge of the film, and this would be what would synchronize the time code, so it would just play the audio off of there to keep it synced up. And every once in a while it would slip, especially if you lost a couple of frames because it caught on fire or something, not that I have any experience with that, and the audio would be out of sync for just a little bit until the next time code sync barcode came up, and it would actually catch right back up to the correct point in the audio. Fascinating stuff, really. It was so delightfully like this blending of analog and digital technologies and everything. It was just awesome. And film had other quirky things. So trailers, for example, the stuff that's on before the movie that advertises some other movie, which isn't the movie you're seeing, they get set at the corporate level. We don't get to decide which movies get which trailers, obviously. If it were up to me, it would be a very different scenario. It would only be movies I was interested in, or trailers that I would expect the people seeing that movie would be interested in. But anyway, they're set at the corporate level. So back in the film days, this was a real pain because halfway through a month run of a movie, they would tell you, oh, time to swap out this trailer. And now, the way that the film actually works is that the first part of the movie is in the center of a big donut, basically. And so it would read from the inside out, which means that the trailers are in the middle section there, which means you can't get to them without just running the movie. So when you needed to splice in a different trailer, you had to run the movie for the first however many trailers until the one you needed to change, and then stop the projector, cut it with a pair of basically scissors. It was like a razor blade, but a slightly more sophisticated version of a pair of scissors, and tape in, because that's how splicing works. Basically, it's cutting and pasting, which is crazy. And you'd have to splice this in, and you'd put that trailer in, and you'd run past it and get past that point, make sure everything's good, and the first run of the day of that movie would skip the first half of those trailers, because you're not going to run it through the projector the entire movie for 2 hours, because there is no faster playback speed, just to get those 2 minutes of trailers. Now in the digital age, we can actually just tell it, oh, these trailers in this order, and rearrange it and do all the cues for the lights and everything. Previously that was done with a barcode scanner at my theater, which is just crazy to me, because it's like 24 frames a second scrolling past, and this barcode reader is just looking for like, oh, do I turn off the lights? Yeah, so it's just kind of this beautiful blending between these technologies, and it's gotten so much better. Now everything runs off the same projector and everything. So the bulbs. So the projector bulbs in a movie theater projector are very different from the sorts of bulbs that we're used to seeing in like those kinds of projectors at home and in offices and stuff. They're giant glass balls with a gap in the middle where it actually arcs, and it's a xenon gas, so it emits light, and it's basically lightning in a tube, and that's how your movie gets lit, and it's kind of crazy. And it is super dangerous to like deal with, because like the amount of power that it takes to arc electricity over a distance like this big is way more than you would expect even in xenon gas. And I should mention that the bulbs had a tendency of exploding. They were under pressure, so anything that broke it did so violently. So you had to wear all this silly looking safety equipment to keep yourself from getting blown up or burned or other things, because they also get quite hot. So anytime you'd need to swap a bulb, it would be a real pain, because you'd have to let the bulb cool down first, and normally you're not able to do that during a set of movies going on during the day, especially with the digital projectors that are now running all the like pre-show stuff before that, because more often than not the projector turns off and then 2 minutes later it's back on, and that's not enough time for the bulb to cool down enough to be handled. The last misconception about movie theaters that I want to address is concession prices. Now, supposedly, according to corporate, and I was in management, so they told us such things, apparently the movie theaters themselves, the corporations that you think of as like being movie theaters, like AMC, Regal, those kinds of places, chain theaters, they apparently claim to make no profit whatsoever on movie tickets. That is apparently set by like what the studios are expecting from them, and it's distributed over like which theaters get which prices, and everything is set at a corporate level. Supposedly, they make no money off of that. That all goes directly to the studio, which I'd like to believe. I never really believed that, but given that how movies are tracked in terms of their success rate is so integrally tied in with their ticket prices, I almost kind of believe that. So if you believe that, then logically the only place they actually make money at movie theaters is the concession stand, and if they have any sort of like games in the lobby and stuff like that. That's apparently the only place in the building where any profit is turned whatsoever. So that's why your popcorn is $9, because it's supporting the entire existence of movie theaters as a concept. Which doesn't really help a customer when they're like, I can make this for $3. So yeah, that's some of the more interesting things about how movie theaters work. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them. I worked there for 8 years, I moved up to management, I really had one of the better experiences of my life, and as things got more digital, as I was going through college and earning my computer science degree, things got more computery, and that was fantastic for me because I got to see real-world applications of the stuff I was learning in school, and it was just fascinating. So I was deeply invested in this job for a long time, and I loved it. It was equal parts communal, because you felt like you were performing a task in your community. You were like bringing culture to your community, which sounds really over the top, but like my theater did operas and stuff like that. We really were part of the culture of that town. It was technical, it was managerial, there was a lot of like actual work that was done to manage a movie theater in a way that people could actually like go to the movies and enjoy it and have a clean theater when they get there. It was a little mundane, you know, cleaning is not a super interesting thing to manage, but I don't know, I feel like people take this sort of thing for granted and they don't really think about the behind the scenes work that goes into making a movie theater happen. And I don't know, I find that really interesting. Obviously, I found it interesting enough to work there for 8 years, and it wasn't just for flexible scheduling, which perk. That and watching all the movies as they came out, which unfortunately corporate cut back on quite a bit by the time I was gone. But for a while there, I watched every single movie the night before it came out with my staff. It was awesome. So yeah, I feel very passionately about movie theaters, so I would love to answer any questions whatsoever. Leave a comment, whatever you want to do. Contact me, I will make another video about this. I find it all fascinating, and so yeah, ask me all your burning questions about movie theaters. I will happily answer that. And that is all for this video. I'll be back again next week with another video that I hope you will find interesting. Until then, stay curious.